Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Just a couple of quick introductions. My name's Lieutenant Lee Rossman with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office. Also present here is Olmsted County Attorney Mark Ostrom and Olmsted County Sheriff's Office Chief Deputy Terry Woletsky. We've given everybody a copy of our statement here, but I'll read through it, and then we'll take some questions at the end if you have any. The Olmsted County Sheriff's Office offers our deepest condolences to the family and friends of John Colbert, who have lost their loved one in this tragedy. On Sunday, May 8th at 10:44 p.m., deputies responded to a shooting in the 5000 block of County Road 105 Northwest in Kalmar Township. Our investigation has led to the following information on these events. A suspicious vehicle arrived at the residence and parked in the driveway. Mr. Colbert's son went outside and saw a male subject near one of their sheds. The son returned to the house and informed Mr. Colbert that he saw a person outside. Mr. Colbert retrieved a .45 caliber handgun from his residence, and Mr. Colbert and his son went back outside to see who was on their property. As Mr. Colbert approached a garage, William Shillingford was standing next to the garage and fired 3 rounds towards Mr. Colbert. Mr. Colbert told his son he had been shot and returned towards the house with his son. Once at the front door of the residence, Mr. Colbert's son grabbed the gun from Mr. Colbert, stepped back outside, and fired 2 rounds towards Shillingford's parked vehicle. Shillingford ran from the residence in an easterly direction towards an unoccupied building on an adjacent property. Responding officers arrived and gave Mr. Colbert medical assistance. Additional officers arrived and set up a perimeter around the residence in looking for the suspect. The neighbors in the area heard the gunshots and drove to the area and saw Mr. Shillingford standing in a ditch and notified officers. Shillingford then ran to a nearby residence where officers located him at the front door of that residence and took him into custody. During the search of the unoccupied residence, officers found a 9mm handgun inside the building. As a result of further investigation, evidence including shell casings were recovered at the scene, and these were consistent with the information that was received at the scene. Byron first responders and Mayo Clinic ambulance service had arrived and taken over the medical care of Mr. Colbert. Despite their efforts, Mr. Colbert was pronounced deceased at the scene at about 11:24 p.m. Mr. Colbert had 2 wounds to his body. He had a grazing wound across his midsection and a wound through his right forearm, which struck an artery. The Olmsted County Sheriff's Office would like to thank the following agencies for their immediate response and assistance: the Rochester Police Department, the Casson Police Department and their K-9 unit, Goodhue County Sheriff's Office and their K-9 unit, the Minnesota State Patrol, the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, Byron Fire Department and Byron First Responders, Mayo Clinic Ambulance, and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. That completes our statement. Does anybody have any questions that we could answer for you at this point?
Yep. Can you clarify if, whether Mr. Shillingford and the victim had any relationship prior to this incident?
Their families were acquaintances, so they did know each other before this incident happened.
Absolutely. And, just can you speak to whether you suspect Mr. Schillingford may have been under the influence of any sort of substance, given his behavior when he was apprehended.
That's still a part of our investigation that's continuing, and we don't have all that information at this point.
Do we know anything about Mr. Schillingford's background at all, just through the criminal complaint, how he shot Mr. Colbert from 3 separate positions, standing, prone, and then crouch? Is there any sort of background, does he have any sort of firearms background or prior experience with firearms? It just seemed odd the way that transpired.
We know he's acquainted with firearms, and he does hunting and such, but other than that, we don't know of any formal training that he's received as far as firing firearms.
Do we know if the handgun, the 9mm handgun that was found, was that registered to Mr. Schillingford?
We're still working on that information.
Was there a motive? Did he speak about why he did this?
We don't have a motive at this time, but it's still information that we are working on.
Has he provided any sort of statement to you guys at all? About just kind of like his thought process?
He has explained his timeline for the night, but as far as any intent or anything like that, he has not disclosed that.
What would lead him to this residence? You can talk to these guys, not me.
Other than knowing that the families are acquainted, he has hunted on this property before, but for that night, we don't know what led him there for this incident to happen.
And in
Miss-
the, oh, go ahead.
Mr. Colbert's son was the one who called 911?
Yes, he is the original caller.
Can you release his name and the other person who was at the residence that night by any chance?
Typically, we don't release witnesses' names at this point in the investigation. Possibly in the future, we can give that name out.
And can you describe Mr. Schillingford's demeanor when he was apprehended and taken into custody? We understand he was yelling some names. Is there any insight as to what those names were or anything of that nature?
Besides the random statements that he made, he was cooperative with law enforcement. He didn't fight. He didn't do anything like that. Basically, he made verbal statements and shouting at the scene. Otherwise, he was cooperative with law enforcement.
So this says the incident started at 10:44. When did he get apprehended by law enforcement?
It would have been approximately 11:20. I don't have the time, but about 11:20.
Can you speak maybe on, we know Mr. Schillingford was from Casson. Can you maybe just speak on more just his position in the community or his involvement in the community? Or it appears he may have been a manager at a fitness center in Casson.
I don't have a lot of history on him. The job that we do know of was a fitness manager or fitness instructor at a gym in Byron.
Has he always been from Casson?
I don't know what his whole history is, so I can't answer that one.
Can you walk us through how his day went prior to this?
He visited relatives with his children and his children's relatives. Made a couple different stops throughout the day into the evening. Before he went out to the incident address, he was speaking with a friend, and that's about all we can give you on that information at this point.
Do we know roughly what time he was speaking with that friend?
That's part of our investigation, so I don't want to give that out at this point.
Was one of the structures that he was hiding in that event center barn near Oxford Park?
Yes,
And can you confirm this is the first murder case in Olmsted County this year, just information-wise?
yes, it is.
When it comes to the 70-year-old man and his defense of his home, I know a man's home is his castle, it's a cliche, but what do we have in that regard that is legal or not legal? Maybe that's-
Mr. Ostrom, maybe you could address that one.
I guess I'll answer it this way. I'll say that to the best of our knowledge, there was nothing unlawful about the victim having in possession of a firearm and certainly responding the way he did. The victim did nothing wrong other than some stranger approached him at his property. So nothing unlawful about that.
But by that, do you also mean the victim's son also returning fire as well?
There would be nothing unlawful about that.
Can you speak to the two second-degree murder charges at all with intent and also without intent, and kind of why there's both?
Sure. As Lieutenant Rossman has indicated, this case is still under investigation. There's still a lot more information to come in. We have an obligation to charge this suspect right away with the best information we have. And so obviously we know that someone died at the scene, so we have a murder charge. We believe it was intentional, which is the first charge, second-degree murder with intent. Just to cover our bases to make sure, we also charged him with what we call felony murder, which is committing a murder or causing the death of someone while committing a felony assault, the assault being the underlying second-degree assault, firing a secondary weapon. So that was our charging decision based on the information we have.
Is there any reason to believe this was premeditated?
The investigation is still ongoing. Lee, you want to have the podium back?
Anything else that we could answer?
I know, so he ran into a nearby residence where, was that someone's home, was someone there when that happened?
Yes, the residents were home at that residence. They did not have contact. He was outside the home.
Was it the residence right to the, I guess if you're facing the property to the right, neighboring property, or was it?
Yes, it was a neighboring property.
And just for clarification purposes, can you also say and spell your name and give your title?
Lieutenant Lee, L-E-E, Rossman, R-O-S-S-M-A-N.
In a situation like this, when you know where the perpetrator is, what are the techniques that law enforcement stands by in terms of their own safety? You can talk to these guys, you know, in the apprehension of a.
When we know where the suspect is at?
Yes, yeah.
Well, in this situation where there are firearms involved, safety is number one priority, our safety and safety of any citizens that might be in the area. So we'll have our firearms drawn, most likely aimed at the suspect, and treat him as a dangerous person as we take him into custody.
Is there any belief that Mr. Sherman may have been going through a mental health crisis at the time, or was he the peer of right mind at the time of arrest?
That's still part of our investigation we're working through.
Was there also surveillance footage?
There was a home video system going at the time, yes.
Is that something that would be released to the media?
Possibly sometime in the future. I don't know if it would be before trial or not, but
I'm shaking my head. I'm
No.
saying no, not before trial.
And would the same apply to potential body camera footage?
Chief Deputy, can you answer that data question? If body camera video would be released?
No, there is no body camera footage that shows the incident, so nothing pertains to this, and if it did, we would wait for the county attorney's opinion on releasing that.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Any message the public should know about this?
I'm sorry?
Any message that you may have to the public about people who are concerned and freaked out about this?
Well, obviously, there's no public safety issue at this point. We have him in custody, and we don't believe that that night, there was any public safety issue during the scene. All right, thank you.